Have you ever felt, even for a brief moment, that your thoughts didn't belong entirely to you? That a reaction appeared too quickly, a fear rose too suddenly, or a decision took shape in your mind before you truly reflected on it? Many people assume this is simply instinct or emotion, but ancient traditions, especially the Gnostic currents, suggest something much deeper. They believed human consciousness was not a solitary island, but a field constantly influenced by forces most people cannot see. And among these forces, there was one described as the great manipulator, a presence so subtle, so ancient, and so intertwined with human behavior that most people mistake its influence for their own free will. Imagine the possibility that every doubt you have ever had, every irrational fear, every self-sabotaging thought may not have originated inside you, but may have been quietly placed there by an entity that thrives when you remain unaware. Now picture the world we live in. Most people move through their days without questioning why they behave the way they do. They repeat the same emotional cycles, the same mistakes, the same self-diminishing beliefs, as if they were trapped in invisible strings. What if these strings are real? What if someone or something designed them long before you were even born? Ancient Gnostic manuscripts speak of an intelligence that operates behind the curtain of reality, engineering an illusion so complete that human beings mistake it for absolute truth. Not a demon, not a god in the traditional sense, but a cosmic impostor that positioned itself as the architect of the physical world. According to these teachings, this entity became the puppet master of humanity, not by force, but by shaping the very structure of perception. Think about how often society tells you what to believe, how to behave, what is right, what is wrong, and even what is possible. But where do these rules come from? Who benefits from a humanity that never questions? The Gnostics warned that a false creator known as the Demiurge established a system built on distraction, confusion, and emotional instability. And whether we see the Demiurge as a literal being or as a symbolic representation of a deeper truth, the core message remains the same. There is a hidden influence guiding your thoughts, maintaining your fears, and limiting your spiritual expansion. Some scholars believe this puppet master operates through culture, religion, and collective belief. Others suggest it works through internal psychological patterns. But in both interpretations, the result is identical. Your mind becomes conditioned to follow a script you never wrote. What's most disturbing is how subtle this influence is. Instead of showing its presence openly, it hides inside the automatic parts of your mind, your impulses, fears, insecurities, and survival instincts. It functions like a silent background program that shapes your identity while convincing you that everything is your own idea. Have you ever wondered why certain negative thoughts feel strangely persistent, as if someone keeps feeding them in small, invisible doses? Or why some emotional wounds remain open even after years of effort to heal them? The Gnostics believed these patterns reveal the puppet master's fingerprints, subtle traces of a force invested in keeping humanity spiritually asleep. Throughout this video, we will uncover who this puppet master is, how ancient civilizations described it, how spiritual texts warned about it, and why its influence has been erased or distorted over centuries. But I won't reveal everything here in the introduction, because the truth becomes clearer only when all the historical, symbolic, and spiritual pieces are aligned. By the end of our journey, you may realize that the force manipulating your thoughts has been present your entire life, and that recognizing it is the first step toward freedom. Before we proceed, if you feel drawn to hidden knowledge, forgotten teachings, and mysteries that challenge the official version of reality, consider subscribing to the channel. Staying connected here is not just supporting the content, it is joining a community committed to awakening from the very influence we are about to expose. To understand the puppet master, we must first understand how the truth about its existence was hidden. And this is where the story becomes unsettling. Throughout history, humanity has been taught to believe that everything in the universe is exactly as it appears. The physical world is the ultimate reality. The mind is an isolated phenomenon, and thoughts arise only from the brain. But ancient Gnostic communities insisted the opposite. They believed the physical world was a kind of spiritual maze, a constructed environment designed to distract human beings from perceiving the higher truth. That consciousness comes from a divine source beyond this world. According to them, something corrupted this divine connection long ago, creating a veil that obscures the true nature of existence. But who placed this veil, and why? The Gnostics described a moment in cosmic history when a lesser creator one, who mistook himself for the Yanthel, supreme being, took control of the material world. They called this entity the Demiurge, and they believed it was responsible for shaping human consciousness in a way that kept people spiritually dependent, confused, and disconnected from their divine origin. Whether we understand the Demiurge as a literal being, a metaphysical force, or a symbol representing systemic control, the message remains clear. Humanity has been guided away from its true self by something posing as the ultimate authority. And the most disturbing part is that ancient writings suggest this deception wasn't merely philosophical, it was intentional. Over time, this puppet master became skilled at hiding its influence behind institutions, traditions, and cultural narratives. The early Gnostics claimed that many powerful groups throughout history, political rulers, religious authorities, and even philosophical schools unknowingly reinforced the Demiurge's worldview, not because they were evil, but because they themselves had become entangled in the illusion. This is how the manipulation spreads, through beliefs passed from generation to generation, never questioned, always repeated. Ideas about fear, obedience, guilt, and separation became woven into the fabric of society until people stopped noticing where these ideas originated. The puppet master doesn't need to appear. It only needs humanity to keep repeating the script it wrote ages ago. But how do we recognize a truth that has been buried for centuries? The Gnostics left clues. They wrote about hidden layers of reality, symbolic keys embedded in ancient texts, and teachings that could awaken a person to the presence behind their thoughts. Some scholars believe the suppression of Gnostic writings in the early centuries of Christianity was not only a political act, but also a spiritual one. By removing alternative perspectives about the nature of the divine and the cosmos, the dominant system reinforced a single worldview, one that made questioning nearly impossible. Imagine an entire library of knowledge deliberately erased, leaving only the narratives that benefited the puppet master's design. And yet, fragments of that lost knowledge survived. Desert scrolls, forgotten manuscripts, and newly discovered texts such as those found in Nag Hammadi revealed a shocking idea. Human consciousness is naturally luminous, free, intuitive, and deeply connected to a divine origin. But something intervened. Something layered illusions over the mind, creating emotional turbulence and psychological patterns that trapped people in repetitive cycles. When we look at our own lives, our fears, insecurities, and limitations, we can see how the Gnostics might have interpreted these patterns as evidence of an external influence shaping human behavior. Now consider your own experience. How many beliefs do you hold simply because they were given to you? How many fears do you carry because you were told they were normal? How many limitations have you accepted because society insisted they were real? Have you ever questioned where these ideas truly began? This is where you start to see the puppet master's work, not in the dramatic supernatural sense, but in the everyday mental habits that keep you from exploring your full consciousness. As we move forward, we will uncover the symbols, texts, and spiritual clues that further expose the identity of this hidden manipulator. But before we proceed, I want to ask you, do you feel that certain fears or beliefs in your life may not be entirely yours? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective is part of this investigation. To understand how the puppet master influenced humanity, we must explore the forgotten sources that dared to describe its methods. When the Nag Hammadi texts were discovered in 1945, they revealed more than spiritual poetry. They exposed a cosmic drama that had been deliberately erased from mainstream history. These ancient Gnostic writings spoke of an unseen structure governing the material world, a kind of spiritual operating system created not by the highest divine source, but by a lesser intelligence. This system, they claimed, was designed to limit the human mind, ensuring individuals remain trapped in cycles of confusion, emotional instability, and spiritual amnesia. Instead of being free beings connected to a higher reality, people were shaped into compliant participants in a world that constantly distracts them from their true origin. One of the most striking ideas found in these texts is that humanity did not simply fall from grace. It was pushed. The Gnostics described a moment when the demiurge, believing himself to be the supreme creator, constructed a world that mirrored his own ignorance. To maintain control, he created layers of intermediary forces known as Archons. These Archons were not monstrous beings in the human sense. Rather, the Gnostics saw them as psychological and energetic structures that interfere with consciousness. They operate subtly, influencing emotions, amplifying fear, distorting perception, and reinforcing limiting beliefs. When someone experiences sudden anxiety, irrational guilt, compulsive thoughts, or cycles of self-doubt, the Gnostics interpreted these as signs of archonic influence, small manipulations that keep a person from awakening to their divine nature. Some scholars believe that the Archons symbolize the automatic thought patterns that dominate the human mind, impulses, fears, conditioned beliefs, and inherited psychological wounds. Others argue that the Gnostics described real spiritual forces that operate in the background of human consciousness. Both interpretations point to the same conclusion. There is something actively maintaining humanity in a state of disconnection. And what is most haunting about these descriptions is that the Archons do not need to control your actions directly. They only need to guide your perception, because once perception is shaped, action follows naturally. Like a puppet whose strings are hidden inside its own mind, a person under archonic influence believes they are thinking freely while unknowingly following a path designed for them. The Gnostics left powerful metaphors to help future generations recognize this manipulation. One of them compared the human mind to a house full of rooms. Some rooms are lit, others are dark, and the puppet master thrives in the dark rooms, those parts of your mind you don't explore, question, or understand. These dark rooms contain fears you never investigated, beliefs you inherited without thinking, and emotional wounds you never healed. The Archons move through these unexamined spaces, whispering thoughts that feel like your own voice. And because you trust your own voice more than anything else, the manipulation becomes nearly impossible to detect. Ancient myths from different cultures hint at similar forces. In Mesopotamia, Egypt, and early Judaism, there were stories of beings who claimed divine authority, but were not the highest source of creation. In some traditions, these entities were described as jealous, possessive, or insecure traits that mirror the Gnostic description of the demiurge. Some scholars believe these myths represent different cultural interpretations of the same phenomenon, a lower intelligence placing itself between humanity and the true divine source, blocking spiritual ascent. You might ask, if these teachings were so important, why were they forgotten? Why were Gnostic communities destroyed, their writings burned, their beliefs declared heresy? The simplest explanation is also the most troubling. Their teachings threatened the established order. By telling people they could access divine truth internally without institutions, intermediaries, or authority, Gnosticism challenged every system that depended on external control. When people awaken to their inner source, they become far harder to manipulate. As you reflect on this, ask yourself, have you ever felt that certain negative thoughts seem to appear automatically, as if someone pressed a button in your mind? Have you noticed emotional patterns that don't feel natural to who you truly are? Share in the comments if you have ever sensed that your inner struggles might come from something deeper than personal experience. Your reflections help build this investigation. If we follow the clues left behind in ancient traditions, it becomes clear that the puppet master's greatest strength is not force, but deception. The Gnostics described this entity as a master illusionist who reshaped reality so subtly that humans began believing the illusion was the whole truth. But how does an unseen force manage to influence billions of minds across centuries? It does so by manipulating symbols, spiritual, cultural, emotional, and even psychological symbols that define how you see yourself and the world. Symbols are powerful because they bypass logic and speak directly to your unconscious. And when a symbol is distorted, the meaning of an entire belief system can be altered without people ever noticing. One of the clearest examples is the concept of the divine itself. In many ancient spiritual traditions, the divine was described as something infinite, boundless, and beyond any form. But as the puppet master's influence spread, this infinite source was gradually replaced by a distant authority figure, strict, jealous, or punishing. The shift may seem small, but it changes everything. When the divine becomes a figure of fear rather than love, people become easier to manipulate. Fear tightens the mind. It closes perception. It reduces a person's spiritual intuition. And fear was one of the primary tools the Gnostics claimed the demiurge and its archons used to maintain their influence. Another symbol the puppet master distorted is the human self. In Gnostic teachings, humans possess a divine spark, a fragment of the highest source. This spark is not metaphorical. It is the core of consciousness itself. But the puppet master introduced a different symbol, the idea that humans are inherently flawed, broken, or guilty. This belief, repeated for centuries, creates a powerful psychological effect. People who believe they are unworthy look outside themselves for validation, authority, and guidance. They hand over their inner power without realizing it. And this is exactly what the puppet master needs. Individuals who doubt their own divine nature and therefore remain dependent on external systems of control. The manipulation also appears in the symbol of the world itself. Instead of being seen as a temporary realm of learning and transformation, the world became described as the ultimate reality, unchangeable, unquestionable, permanent. This illusion keeps people focused on material concerns, physical fears, and social expectations. Ancient Gnostic texts insisted that the material world is not the true home of human consciousness. It is a constructed, dense layer separating the soul from its divine origin. But when people believe the physical world is all there is, they stop seeking the higher reality hidden behind it. In this way, the puppet master doesn't need to hide the spiritual realm. It only needs to convince humanity that no such realm exists. Symbols related to freedom were also inverted. For instance, the idea of obedience became associated with safety, while questioning became associated with danger or rebellion. But the Gnostics argued that true spiritual growth begins with questioning. When you challenge the beliefs you inherited, you weaken the puppet master's influence. That is why these texts encourage seekers to know themselves, not in a superficial sense, but in the deepest possible way, examining every emotion, every thought, every impulse, to determine where it truly originates. Self-knowledge becomes a spiritual weapon, a way to reclaim the consciousness the Archons attempt to manipulate. Some scholars believe the greatest distortion involves the symbol of duality, the idea that light and darkness, good and evil, are equal opposing forces. But the Gnostics taught something different. Darkness is not a force equal to light. It is simply the absence of light. Ignorance is the absence of knowledge. Fear is the absence of understanding. This subtle shift changes the entire spiritual landscape. It means the puppet master cannot overpower you if you bring awareness into the parts of your mind where it hides. Awareness breaks the illusion. Presence dissolves manipulation. But as long as people fear the darkness, they never dare to illuminate it. Now reflect for a moment. Which symbols shaped your understanding of the world? Did you grow up thinking you were flawed, limited, or small? Do you sense that some of the beliefs you carry today may not reflect your true essence? Share your insights in the comments. They help others recognize the illusions they have lived under. If the puppet master has influenced humanity for thousands of years, The next question becomes unavoidable. How did this force spread its influence so successfully, and through whom? The Gnostics argued that the Demiurge and its Archons did not manipulate humanity directly through supernatural events, but through structure systems of belief, culture, and authority that shaped the human mind from childhood. These systems were not evil in themselves, but they unknowingly carried the imprint of the puppet master, repeating ideas and patterns that limit inner freedom. This is where history and spirituality intersect, because when we examine how societies formed, how religions grew, and how governments enforced certain worldviews, we can see that the same symbolic narrative, the same psychological architecture appears again and again. Imagine a world where people naturally connect with their intuition, question their reality, and rely on inner wisdom rather than external authority. In such a world, the puppet master would lose power. So, according to the Gnostics, the Demiurge shaped a system designed to discourage questioning and reward obedience. Over centuries, this influence took the form of rigid dogmas, strict traditions, and fear-based teachings. But it is essential to clarify something. The Gnostics never blamed individuals. They believed most human leaders, teachers, and institutions acted with sincerity, unaware that they were reinforcing an illusion. The real manipulator, they said, was behind them, an unseen architect shaping consciousness from the shadows. Some scholars interpret this idea symbolically. The system itself becomes the puppet master. The patterns of thought passed from parent to child, the unquestioned cultural beliefs repeated over generations, the fears embedded in moral teachings, the ideas that limit human potential, these become the invisible tools of manipulation. According to this view, the Demiurge represents the collective structure of ignorance that humanity inherited, while the Archons symbolize the inner psychological forces that enforce this structure. This interpretation aligns with modern psychology. We are conditioned from birth to think in certain ways, and these mental patterns become so automatic that we forget they were ever taught to us. But the Gnostics also believed the distortion had a cosmic dimension. They described the Archons as forces that operate through fear, confusion, and emotional turbulence. Whenever a person sinks into despair or feels disconnected from their inner light, the Archons tighten their influence. They create the illusion that suffering is permanent, that fear is natural, and that spiritual connection is impossible. The more a person identifies with these illusions, the easier it becomes to control their inner world. Some ancient texts even describe the Archons as imitators, forces that mimic inspiration and intuition but twist it into doubt, guilt, or anxiety. The puppet master, therefore, does not always push you backward. It sometimes pretends to guide you forward, only to lead you into deeper confusion. Throughout history, whenever a society or spiritual movement tried to awaken people to their divine spark, something eventually happened. Their teachings were suppressed, altered, or absorbed into the mainstream in a diluted form. The Gnostics experienced this fate. So did early mystics, esoteric groups, and teachers who encouraged inner knowledge over external authority. Some scholars argue that this recurring pattern is evidence of a deeper force shaping human development, not through dramatic events, but through subtle influence that redirects society each time it approaches spiritual awakening. Whether we see this as symbolic or literal, the pattern is undeniable. Movements that empower individuals tend to be marginalized, while systems that encourage obedience endure. This raises an important question for you. Do you ever feel that certain ideas about yourself, your worth, your limits, your fears, are not chosen, but given to you? Ideas you absorbed simply because they were repeated by culture, religion, or family. The Gnostics believe these inherited beliefs are the puppet master's most effective tools. Because when a person accepts a limiting belief, the Archons no longer need to interfere. The person becomes their own gatekeeper, defending the very thoughts that keep them restricted. As we move toward the next blocks, we will reach the turning point, the hidden revelation that changes everything. For now, reflect on this. Which beliefs in your life feel heavy, imposed, or unnatural? Share them in the comments. Your insights may help others identify the invisible strings they have carried for years. Up to this point, we have explored how the puppet master, described by the Gnostics as the demiurge and its Archons, engineered an intricate system of control based on fear, confusion, and inherited beliefs. But now we reach the turning point, the revelation, that changes everything. According to ancient Gnostic teachings, the most powerful secret hidden from humanity was not the identity of the puppet master, nor the mechanics of its influence, but something infinitely more personal, the divine spark within every human being. This spark, also called the pneuma, was described as a fragment of the true divine source, untouched by the false creator. It is the part of you that the puppet master cannot control, cannot corrupt, and cannot extinguish. And this is precisely why the illusion had to be built, not to imprison your body, but to distract you from the light that has always existed inside your consciousness. The Gnostics believed the divine spark is not a metaphor, but the literal core of your being. It is your intuition, your deeper wisdom, your sudden moments of clarity, your sense of connection to something higher than this world. Whenever you feel an inner voice pushing you toward truth, justice, compassion, or liberation, that is the spark attempting to wake you. And whenever you feel irrational fear, self-doubt, guilt, or the sense that you are unworthy, these are the outer layers constructed by the puppet master, trying to smother that spark and keep you spiritually dormant. This is the cosmic conflict the Gnostics described, not a battle fought outside in the world, but a battle inside the human mind and heart. This forgotten revelation changes the entire landscape of spiritual awakening. If the divine spark is real, and if it exists in every person, then the puppet master's power becomes fragile, even temporary, because illusions only work when the viewer believes them. The moment a person begins questioning their inherited beliefs, examining their inner wounds, and turning inward toward their own consciousness, the illusion begins to dissolve. This is why the Gnostics placed so much emphasis on gnosis, inner knowledge, direct experience, personal insight. They believed salvation was not granted by external authorities or rituals, but achieved through awakening to the spark within. This awakening does not give you new power. It reveals the power you already had. But here is where the revelation becomes truly transformative. The Gnostics taught that the spark is not alone. They believed all divine sparks across humanity are connected, forming a hidden network of consciousness that the demiurge cannot access. Some scholars interpret this as a mystical version of collective intuition, the shared sense of empathy, justice, and truth that appears across cultures. Others see it as a metaphysical connection between souls. The meaning is profound either way. When you awaken, you strengthen others. Awareness spreads. Illusions weaken. The puppet master loses influence not because it is defeated, but because people stop believing its lies. Now think about your own life. Have you ever felt an inner knowing that contradicted everything you were taught? Have you experienced moments where you saw through a belief that once held power over you? These are moments when the divine spark briefly shines through the layers of conditioning. And each time this happens, the puppet master's strings loosen just a little more. The Gnostics believed this inner awakening was the true purpose of human existence, to rediscover the divine spark, to reclaim inner authority, and to reconnect with the true source beyond the illusion of the material world. This turning point also reframed suffering. Instead of seeing fear, confusion, and limitation as natural, the Gnostics saw them as evidence of interference. In their view, you are never meant to live in constant anxiety or insecurity. You are designed to experience clarity, intuition, and direct connection with the divine. But the puppet master benefits when you forget this. That is why recognizing the spark within is such a transformative act. It breaks the illusion from the inside out. Take a moment and ask yourself, have you ever felt a quiet strength inside you that you can't explain? A sense that you are more than the roles, labels, and fears the world placed on you? Share your experiences in the comments. You may discover that others feel the same, and that awakening is already happening across many minds. If the hidden force described by the Gnostics truly operates through fear, confusion, and inherited beliefs, then the most important question becomes, how does this affect you right now in your daily life? The answer is unsettling but empowering. According to ancient teachings, the puppet master doesn't need to create new illusions. It only needs you to keep repeating the old ones. Every time you doubt yourself, every time you believe you are unworthy, every time you silence your intuition because the world says otherwise, you unknowingly strengthen the mental structures that the Archons use to influence consciousness. The manipulation is not external. It happens inside your own thoughts. But here lies the revelation that turns everything upside down. You can break this influence simply by becoming aware of it. Awareness, the Gnostics said, is like light entering a dark room. Once you see what's inside, the shadows lose their power. When you examine your fears instead of obeying them, when you question beliefs instead of accepting them, when you turn inward and listen to the quiet voice beneath the noise, that is when the divine spark begins to rise again. This spark is not symbolic. It is the part of you that the puppet master cannot reach. It is the source of intuition, inner strength, and spiritual clarity. Right now, ask yourself, which thoughts feel inserted as if they don't match who you truly are? Which fears repeat endlessly, even when your rational mind knows they make no sense? These patterns may be the exact points where the puppet master exerts influence. By naming them, you weaken them. By observing them, you detach from them. And by questioning them, you reclaim your inner authority. Share your reflections in the comments. Your insight might help others recognize their own hidden strings. Now that we've walked through the hidden architecture of this ancient illusion, the final revelation becomes clear. The puppet master was never as powerful as it appeared. Its influence depends entirely on your unawareness. The moment you begin to question, to observe, and to reconnect with the divine spark inside you, the illusion starts to weaken. The Gnostics believe that every act of inner awakening, every moment of clarity, every refusal to accept inherited fear, every recognition of your true nature breaks one more thread of the invisible strings that have guided humanity for centuries. You are not small, fragile, or spiritually disconnected. You are a fragment of the highest source, navigating a world designed to make you forget. And yet, the very fact that you are here, listening to this revelation, shows that something inside you has already begun to awaken. The divine spark responds whenever it hears truth, even if that truth challenges everything you were taught. This journey does not end here. In fact, this is only the beginning. Awakening is not a single moment, but a continuous unfolding, a process of seeing what was hidden, questioning what was imposed, and reclaiming what was always yours. Before we close, I want to invite you to become part of this community of seekers who refuse to live under illusion. Comment your thoughts below, especially what part of this investigation resonated with you the most. Like this video if it opens something inside you, and subscribe to the channel if you want to continue exploring the mysteries, texts, and revelations that were forgotten or deliberately concealed. Because every time you participate, you help keep these hidden truths alive. And together, we make sure the search for knowledge continues. Are you ready for the next revelation?